Throughout human history, warriors have fought in battles for glory, honor, and sometimes just to avoid doing the laundry. Some warriors stood out not just for how they lived, but for how they met their end. Sure, most of us will probably go out quietly, maybe with a last bowl of ice cream in hand. But not these guys. They took their final moments and turned them into the kind of stories you'd want to tell around a campfire. Or, at a Viking party. Here are 6 of the most epic warrior deaths in human history. Buckle up. Leonidas. Let's start with one of the biggest legends out there. King Leonidas of Sparta. You might know him from the movie 300, where he spends most of the time flexing his abs and shouting dramatic lines. But the real story of Leonidas is just as crazy. Back in 480 BCE, the Persian Empire led by King Xerxes decided it was going to invade Greece with an army so big it probably needed its own zip code. Leonidas, however, wasn't the kind of guy to back down. Instead of fleeing or hiding, he took a small force of 300 Spartans, a few thousand other Greek warriors, and marched straight to the narrow pass of Thermopylae to block the Persian horde. And when I say horde, I mean a lot of Persians. Like, more Persians than you've had bad Tinder dates. What made Leonidas' death epic wasn't just the battle itself, but his stubbornness. Even when things started looking grim, he stood his ground. He and his 300 Spartans held off the Persian army for 3 days, delivering what can only be described as a world-class butt-kicking. Eventually, they were betrayed by a local, who showed the Persians a way around the pass. But Leonidas didn't run. He stayed and fought to the last breath, knowing full well that his death would inspire the rest of Greece to rise up and defeat the Persians. Talk about going out with a bang. William Wallace. Next on the list is William Wallace, the Scottish hero who got so mad at the English that he pretty much started a rebellion single-handedly. Wallace was a tall dude, like really tall for the time, who wielded a massive sword and had a thing for causing mayhem. Back in the late 13th century, Scotland was under English control, and Wallace decided that enough was enough. After winning some key battles, including the Battle of Stirling Bridge, Wallace became the de facto leader of the Scottish resistance. And then things went south. In 1305, after several years of guerrilla warfare, which is just a fancy way of saying annoying the English, Wallace was captured by English forces and brought to London for trial. Now, most people in his shoes would have begged for mercy. But Wallace? Nope. He gave the English a death stare and refused to acknowledge their king as his ruler. So what did they do? They decided to make an example of him by executing him in the most brutal way possible, being hanged, drawn, and quartered. But before Wallace met his grisly end, he supposedly shouted one last word. Freedom! And honestly, can you think of a cooler last word? It's like the medieval equivalent of dropping the mic. Wallace may have died, but his legacy sparked a fire that eventually led to Scotland's independence. Not bad for a guy who spent most of his life swinging a sword. El Cid. Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, better known as El Cid, was a legendary Spanish knight and military leader. If you don't know him, think of a medieval version of Chuck Norris, but with more armor and a fancier mustache. El Cid spent his life fighting both Christians and Muslims, depending on who was paying him at the time. He was basically a mercenary, but one with style. In 1099, El Cid was defending the city of Valencia from an invasion by the Almoravids, a Muslim dynasty from North Africa. The problem? El Cid wasn't feeling great, probably because he was dead. That's right, he died of natural causes just as the enemy was about to attack. Most people would think, well, I guess that's it. But not El Cid's wife, Doña Jimena. She came up with the most insane plan ever. Knowing the troops would panic if they learned their leader was dead, she had El Cid's body strapped onto his horse, armor and all. The next day, the dead man led his army into battle. The sight of the supposedly dead El Cid charging forward freaked the enemy out so much that they retreated. That's right, El Cid won a battle after dying. He literally ghosted his enemies.